started.
Will not answer while standby.
It has the do not disturb for the driving feature, like when you updated your phone. And I had it in my purse, and I had it in a grocery cart, and then I'm walking around the grocery store with my purse in it, and it thought it was driving because it was.
So you have it turned on.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I thought that was kind of neat that it was doing that.
That's
But
what you care about, and I was like, ooh, new emojis. Like that was my concern.
I was not excited about new emojis, but I can see where.
Dinosaurs emoji, that's why.
Nice.
That's just
Nice.
Right, that's the year. That's what I care about versus.
Good to know. All right. Today we are doing a talk that is entitled "Learning Styles Are Bogus: Brain-Based Teaching and Learning Strategies That Work." I was at a conference once, then they mentioned that anytime you put a colon or semicolon in your title, you're more likely to get people to come, because the longer you make that title, the more likely people come, because they're like, oh, well, there's a semicolon. I know. I wanted to highlight that the information that I am presenting today is coming mainly from two different sources. One source was a High Schools at Work presentation that I attended last February from a Dr. Marcia Tate. And this is her website here, and she's the author of a book titled Worksheets Don't Grow Dendrites, 20 Instructional Strategies That Engage the Brain. And that's something that I'm going to be sharing with you all today as well. And then I also attended a conference earlier this year in October. It was the Excellence in Psychology Instructional Conference. It was at the University of Wisconsin-Green Bay. And some of my information today is from one of its keynote speaker, which is Eric Landrum from Boise State. So I wanted to make sure that I highlighted where some of my information came from, because it's not really so much stuff that I have come up with. It's just kind of a gathering of information that you could kind of dig around and find. So I have a couple of nuggets for you today. And so in talking about instructional strategies and learning strategies, we're all here for the same purpose, which is, of course, teaching and learning and being great teachers. And I want to throw out, first of all, that you are all good teachers. I mean, there's no singular way to be a good teacher. And I think that in the educational realm, we sometimes get bogged down with, am I doing this right? Is this the way that I'm supposed to be doing things? And we forget that there's multiple ways and multiple strategies that teaching can be good and that teaching can be effective. And we forget about that a lot. And I also think that sometimes that happens is we get so ingrained in doing something one way, whether it's whatever the latest initiative is in teaching, that we think that's the only way to do stuff. And we forget that there's multiple strategies, multiple ways, and I just get kind of stuck in a rut. And I think that happens to a lot of us in teaching. And so today, one of our goals is to look at what are some things that I do that I know I do really well, but how could I expand on that? I'm not here to tell you that your teaching is bad and that what you're doing is wrong, because in many ways it probably isn't. But instead, reflecting on what it is that you do, how could you change things just a little bit to maybe make things that much better? And that's really what today is going to be about. So just a couple of nuggets about that. So to begin with, learning styles are bogus. So like me, you have probably learned about learning styles, and that children learn in a certain way, and that some children are auditory, and some children are visual, and that some children are bodily kinesthetic. And you might have even made assessments that are, these are for my visual learners, and these are for my auditory learners. And research tells us that that's just not true. And sometimes that happens in education is that we kind of hop on an educational bandwagon. We're like, oh, this is the great new thing, and we're all going to do this, and it's wonderful. And then, we actually go and research it and find out that that's not how people learn, and that's not how our children really learn. And yet, I mean, this is a myth that has been debunked like over 10 years ago. And yet it is still incredibly pervasive. That I just saw a post yesterday. It was about Schoology, which is another kind of platform that some school districts use to post information and stuff like that. And in Schoology, it had the 3 different learning styles that you were supposed to indicate like what your learning style was. So what the research really does tell us is that everybody is a visual learner. Everybody is an auditory learner. Everybody is a bodily kinesthetic kind of learner. It's not like you just learn in one way, just the same as you don't teach in one way. So if everybody learns in these ways, and this has been like a pervasive sort of target in teaching, and this kind of cornerstone in teaching that you teach towards these learning styles, what really does research tell us? And the other thing that research tends to tell us is that we don't do a very good job when we create lessons that are multifaceted to try to hit all of these different types of students in the same classroom. That instead, a lot of research is coming out saying that we do better when we look at homogeneous groups, that homogeneous groups tend to work much better. And when you do research about like mixed ability children, where you put your high levels and your low levels together, that it doesn't really mean that you have better learning outcomes for all of those children. It just doesn't seem to happen that way. So today I want to share with you what is it that research is really telling us about teaching and that makes teaching effective and makes learning really happening. And there's 2 major takeaways, and that is engagement and support. That when we look at lifelong success, lifelong academic and career types of goals, we look at what types of environments that students really came from, what kind of backgrounds, what kind of learning abilities, that time and again, when we've heard things like, you as the teacher are the number 1 influential person in the classroom, and we've heard that statistic kind of thrown out there so many times, what does that really mean to us? It's that we found that long-term success reveals that our classroom engagement of our students and our learning support are our highest indicators of what's really happening in the classroom. That when children are engaged and when they feel supported, that's what's going to create the best learning outcomes, regardless of the way that you get there. So that it's not so much about teaching in one way, teaching towards one type of student. It's that, can you engage your students? Are your students engaged? That if you can get them engaged in whatever method, that is going to increase their learning, that is going to increase their achievement. But then the other piece, and this is really where we come in, is that learning support. Are you creating a classroom environment in which they feel that their learning is being supported? So that even if their academic achievement doesn't seem as great, if you're providing learning support, you're still seeing higher levels of academic achievement than you would if you didn't have some support. So some things that kind of back that up. So this is called the Big 6, and it's about college experiences, but I think there's a lot here that actually resonates with high school as well. And it was a research study that was done by Gallup, which is a big polling kind of industry, and it looked at college students and recent college grads and also college grads that had been out of the college for quite a while, and it looked at their academic success. It also looked at their career success. How well did these students really do? And what it really wanted to feature was, what were some of the commonalities that these students had in their college experiences? Because there's always been some argument about like going to a public college versus a private college. What kind of grades do you get, and how much does that resonate into actually being successful in a career? And what Gallup really found was that most students, if they can check off one of these Big 6 college experiences, that was much more likely that they were going to have lifelong career success. And so what they also found was that most students could not check off all 6 of these. And so it was only like 3% of the grads that they found were able to check off all of the big 6. And so they were broken down into support and experience. So support, I had at least one professor at college who made me excited about learning. This was the number one thing that they were most likely going to be able to indicate, was that they had at least one person that made them excited, made them engaged, and they could very easily remember who that person was. And so it's like, okay, that's definitely looking into the support. My professors at college cared about me as a person. That again, it's not just that they're making me excited about learning, but that they care about me as a person. This was actually the very last one that had the fewest amount of people being able to mark that they had a mentor who encouraged me to pursue my goals and dreams. That they might have been excited about learning, but they often didn't make personal connections with college professors, and because they didn't have those personal connections, they didn't really get to have conversations about what are my goals, what are my dreams, what do I really want to do. So that's kind of the support feature. But then they also had different experiences, and that if these students had these experiences in their college life, that also increased their success. So I worked on a project that took a semester or more to complete. I had an internship or a job that allowed me to apply what I was learning in the classroom, and I was extremely active in extracurricular activities and organizations while I attended college. Northview, I think it's really kind of interesting that I had put this together before at our faculty meeting, that we had talked about that this was going to be one of our goals. Because this is in multiple places that we're seeing that when we have students who are engaged, extracurricular activities, organizations, that increases the likelihood of success and achievement. So even though, again, like I said, that this is based on college experiences, this still resonates in high school. There's still a lot of common issues that can happen in high school. So if these are my experiences and my preparedness, what then would that look like in a high school classroom? And that's where we come to 10 characteristics that we see in brain-compatible classrooms. And this is all about that sort of support. This is what my classroom looks like, that no matter who is walking into your room, high-level students, middle students, low-level students, doesn't really matter. That if these are the elements that you can walk in and have, that you're creating an environment for learning to take place, that you are adding that supportive sort of environment that any child could succeed and learn in, regardless of how you're delivering instruction, regardless of personality types or anything like that. If you're creating these 10 experiences, that's going to increase your level of success. And I know that when I look at this list, oh, hi, come on in. When I look at this list, I can tell you there's some things that I know that I do better than others. But if I'm honest with myself and I look at this, I know there's things that I don't do as much. And that's something that I wanted to highlight to you, that you can probably also look at this list and be like, okay, I try to do this, but there's just other things that I'm not as apt to do. It's not something that I might be as comfortable with. And so part of today, I wanted you to kind of think about, how could you push yourself? How could you do something that was different, that allowed for a more brain-compatible classroom? So big one, of course, is a positive environment. That everything, whatever is happening, it's with that positivity in mind. We're not putting people down. We're being funny but not sarcastic. That's something that a lot of high school students don't get the subtle difference between. That as an adult, we might be making a joke that is sarcastic, but that sarcasm doesn't resonate. So that positive environment doesn't really come about. This is one that when I first saw it, it really stuck with me, because I remember always thinking in my mind that a well-run classroom was one where students were quiet and they were engaged and they were listening, and I knew they were listening because they weren't like chatting with each other, and they they're paying attention. But what research really tells us is that students who are talking about content are learning content, and that it is such a natural human behavior to talk to each other that when we don't allow talking, like we're damaging kind of that learning that potentially could be taking place. So like when students turn to each other, you make some kind of outlandish statement in class, and then kids turn to each other and they start talking. That's not a bad thing. Like, I think our mind automatically wants to go, that's a behavior problem because now that kid is talking. But instead, it's allowing for opportunities to talk and to share ideas. Something that I've implemented in my class this year, I don't know if you can really see it, but how my room is now arranged, it's all in groups of 4. So 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, 4, because I have in my classroom families. And that as part of our families, we have designated people that we're always talking to. So your family has a family name, you have a family cheer, and you're supposed to have some sort of like family gesture that you do, which I actually pulled from cribbage because Andy Roth and I have been cribbage partners for a while. We are the Banditos, and when we win, we have a very special saying that we do. And Greg Christie and I are partners this year, and we also have a special saying, and that it's a kind of a bonding experience, and that I spent time at the beginning of the school year telling kids, you are a family, create a family cheer. And, you get some of the cool kids who don't want to do that sort of thing, and, whatever. But there's kids who, they are the Pink Floyds. They are the Pink Floyds, and they have a clap that they do, and that they become a family. And it becomes an easy kind of, at the beginning of class, talk with each other about what are some of the different types of sleep disorders. And then they already have their family, they can turn to each other, they already discuss, and that helps to set the tone that talking is okay because you're talking about content, which means that you're learning about content. And that also kind of goes into rituals. Spending time on rituals is very, very important. That by having the same kind of process and procedure that you always do, that helps maintain a classroom management and a place where students know what is expected of them. That if they always know what is expected, then they come in with a better feeling of this is what's happening today. I know what is occurring, and that it's not going to throw me for a loop. I know what my expectations are. Having visuals, playing music, having my lessons mean something, making them relevant, moving around, having high expectations. This is one that I also know I don't do very often and I should really work on. It's that having situations where there's a lot of challenge but low stress. So that something is really, really challenging, but if I fail at it, that it doesn't hurt me in some way. So having a high challenge environment but a low stressful environment. In knowing this, I've tried to do a lot more things where it's all about participation. That I'm just looking for you to participate in something. That failure isn't a bad thing. It means that learning can take place. So high challenge, low stress, and then also making our lessons taught in bits. And so knowing what those bits are and then breaking them up a little bit, as opposed to doing these long stretches, which we're kind of, in our environment of 41-minute periods, we're kind of lucky in some ways that, our chunks aren't ever going to be super long. But when we look at, our double blocks and things like that, that we're doing those kinds of smaller bits. Does anyone want to elaborate on any of these? And actually, you know what, Mr. Swaggerty, I'm going to ask you to move forward a little bit. And if you all could maybe discuss for a moment in your families, what are some of these things that you see yourself doing and not doing? You can move your desk. The desks are not nailed to the floor. They're not nailed to the floor. No, we haven't used them yet. That's next.
Yeah, mine too. It's really always working through. So I used to do history training, so I think that the one like the high expectations, the high challenge, low stress, like the content probably some stuff was like the expectation is really high, but there's no limitation in the grade, there's no extra credit. But at the same time, like that high challenge, there's just no high credit. But the expectation is still you're not also right. Try to get them moving as soon as possible. Some days oh yeah, probably yeah. The nice thing about science.
If I were the superintendent or the principal, I would change the schedule, but I don't know.
And I'd have a start later.
Yeah. Oh, God. First period is a disaster.
If I were the principal, I'd go to the teachers and get them voted. Like 3 times.
Hey, I wasn't even on the committee. That got nowhere. Yeah, we need to, but I like the whole rituals taught is something I'm sorry, I'm using my colors because I have to, but like the green is something I really wanted to do. One of my rituals on Fridays is the High Five Friday, and they really get engaged just from that alone, just because of the human contact. I don't know the science behind it, but I'm telling you, there is something that happens in the brain when there's a high five, and there's what's the thing that the brain releases? Not dopamine, serotonin. So I know that happens because I read about it. But the rituals, though, I was thinking more like centered around content. What kind of rituals can I implement in the classroom so that we have weekly or daily rituals that have to do with the content, even if it's for like 5 minutes.
But you're doing essential text quizzes.
I did, but we got away from it, and I want to get back to it because I really love that. But Terry and I were arguing about it. She thought it wasn't. It was too random and didn't have to do with the content we were working on. But I thought it doesn't matter as long as they're learning vocabulary and they're learning concepts. So it's something I'll get back to because I think that's one of them that we really could have done better with. So. Does anybody do that here? Like anything like that? Yeah. Well, Bogus used to do the current
I was looking around the room and I was like, how often do we look at the post that says cell phones are forbidden? You know what I mean? But then he's like, I get it now. You know what I mean? Like it's nice. If sometimes it's one thing. Sometimes
one of the reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So I don't think it's a bad thing. Right.
Because it's a short period. Yeah. And we're falling way behind. If we were to longer periods, that would definitely be something that would be
I'm hearing really great things, but we're going to move on from this and talk about what do we know about the brain and how does the brain learn. Kelsey's just giving me the eye because she is, and that's okay. Kelsey, do you know anything about the brain?
Oh, God. The neuron. Did you write that?
I did just write that.
Okay.
Do you know what a neuron is?
It's part of the brain.
It is part of the
Would you
brain.
like me to name another part of the brain? I can name another part of the brain.
Well, based on your response, I don't know if you quite know so much about the brain because, does anyone know what a neuron is? Anyone want to take a guess? What is a neuron? Close.
Basic brain cell.
It is the basic brain cell. Very good. It is a basic brain cell. So in talking about the brain and how the brain works, we can go all the way down to the cellular level to help us understand how learning takes place. And we can use the neuron as an example of that. So a neuron is a cell. And because it is a cell, it has some similar characteristics of any kind of cell. So we're going to be drawing the neuron, and you can do that here in your notes. And this is why we have different color pencils today, is that we are drawing a neuron. So if it's a cell, what would I find at the center of this cell? Very good. I'm going to have a nucleus. Excellent. So I am starting, and by the way, I'm going to use this whole space, so however you want to, make your neuron to size. We're starting with a nucleus because, like any cell, I am going to have a nucleus at the center of my cell where all of my DNA and such would be. So this is my nucleus. Any other characteristics that you can think of that a cell, because it's a brain cell, what other kind of characteristic it might have? It has a nucleus. A membrane. Okay, good. So a membrane, in that we think of that membrane as a body to my cell. So the next part that we're going to draw is going to be my neuron's cell body. And the cell body, you might remember what kind of a shape does an animal cell have? Does anyone remember what kind of shape an animal cell or a plant cell? Animal is circular or round. Good. Plant? More rectangular. Excellent. A neuron or a brain cell, its cell body is very irregular looking in that it's almost star shaped. So I'm using a different color to indicate a different part, and it's kind of like so. And so this is my cell body. And the cell body of a neuron, this is called my soma. Not to be confused with a stoma, which is the hole that you put in the trachea for people who have throat cancer from smoking.
Stoma means mouth.
Stoma does mean mouth. Yes, it does, because that's where.
That's just what is a quiz bowl question.
Soma means body, but those are Greek words.
Yes, exactly. And so that is why this is the soma or cell body of my neuron. Good. So this is the cell body of my neuron. Anyone know what the purpose of these cells are? Like why have brain cells? Like what do they do for us? Yeah, it's all about communication. Okay, good. So we're looking at communication. This is a type of cell that's going to communicate with other types of cells. And so that's how we get into our other parts of our neuron. So from my soma, I'm going to have these branching fibers. I'm drawing these branching fibers. And again, I'm using a different color to indicate a different part of my neuron. So these are my branching fibers. Does this look like anything to anyone yet? What these branches might remind them of? Antlers? A tree. Good. Like roots. Excellent. And in fact, our word people will appreciate the word for this part of my neuron. In that these tree-like structures, this is called my dendrites. These are my dendrites. My dendrites. Isn't it a Latin word, I believe, for tree? Dendra? Yes, exactly. Dendrites. So they look like roots. They look kind of like vines. And we'll talk in just a moment about its purpose. So we have our dendrites, our branching fibers that come off of my soma, my cell body. But you might notice that I left this part open because it goes to the longest part of my neuron. And the longest part of my neuron is known as my axon. This is my axon. And my axon is going to have a cover to it. Oh, you do, Mr. Creech?
I read about it in Talent Code.
In the what?
It's a book called the Talent Code,
Yeah.
but I forget the name now.
Ooh, I'm hearing it. Good. I'm impressed.
I'm impressed by your artistic ability.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Well, you know, I do teach AP Psych 6 times a day, which means that when I teach the neuron, I draw this 6 times a day.
The same thing 6 periods a day, and it doesn't look that good.
Well.
It failed the psychological.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. I also draw a very nice eye and ear.
Are those spaced out like that?
Yes, they are. They are not connected, no. I don't want to mess up my markers. That's why I'm erasing my orange. And as I heard several people mention, this is my myelin sheath. Does anyone know what kind of tissue the myelin sheath is? Anyone know what kind of tissue? It is fat. It is fat. It is a fatty tissue. Why do you suppose the axon might have a fatty tissue surrounding it? There's actually 2 purposes. Anyone want to take a guess? Insulation, good. So insulation and protection. So that's going to be probably my major reason why I have myelin sheath encasing my axon. But there's a second reason. Kind of, a little bit. How about I give you this hint, and then maybe it'll make more sense. As we age, our myelin sheath deteriorates. And that this happens to all people, that myelin sheath decays, it will deteriorate. What is it that those young folk just really hate about older drivers?
They forget to turn their blinker off.
Blinkers, yes. They're too slow. What are they so slow about?
Reactions.
Yeah, their reactions. And I just mentioned that as we age, our myelin sheath deteriorates. Might that help make a connection about the second purpose of my myelin sheath?
Help the messages move more quickly between
good. So we said that our neuron's all about messaging, and that I'm going to need to send a message point A to point B, okay? That I also need to think about the speed of that message. So my myelin sheath as a fatty tissue is encasing my axon, is protecting my axon, but the other part is that it's making this message, this neural impulse, or technically called an action potential, it makes it move faster. Okay, it's making the message move faster. So having the myelin sheath makes the message move faster. As I get older, then, my myelin sheath is going to deteriorate. And that's one of the reasons why older people are going to have slower reaction times. Now, the final part of my neuron, the end of my neuron, is the place where my message itself is going to exit. Now, when you are exiting out of an airport, what do you exit out of? Where do you leave? What's the part of that airport called? A terminal, exactly. And this is my axon terminal. This is my axon terminal. It's where my message is going to leave. So we said that this is all about messaging. So please repeat after me. Axons speak.
Axons speak.
Dendrites listen.
Dendrites listen.
Again, axons speak.
Axons speak.
Dendrites listen.
Dendrites listen.
What do dendrites do?
Listen.
They listen. So what do you suppose that they do with my message?
They take another neuron's message.
Yeah, they're gonna receive a message, right? Let's do that together. They're receiving. It's like receiving a hug. Please, we're doing this. We're all receiving a message, like receiving a hug. Excellent. What do you think that my soma does with a message? Because it's a cell body. What do you suppose it would do? It's a cell body. Yeah, like interpret. It's going to process my message. We're processing We are all processing messages. Good. My soma is going to process my message. Now, what does my axon do? It speaks. It speaks, right? Axons speak. Dendrites listen. Again, axons speak. Dendrites listen. What do my dendrites do?
Listen.
They're receiving. We're all doing this. We're receiving our message. Good. My soma processes my message. My axon sends the message away. Sends it away. Good. Good. It sends it away. It's fine. It's fine. Good. Okay, so what I was just doing there for you was I was giving you a sample of a lesson utilizing multiple strategies to help with the engagement of this material. So this is material that, there's more parts to the neuron. I'm not going to get into all that with you guys because we're running short on time. But this is one way that I teach my students about the neuron. But I'm teaching them about the neuron because I'm utilizing some of the instructional strategies that were presented to me from Dr. Marcia Tate during her talk. And that there's 20 here, and I'm not going to read all of them. But they're just different ways that help increase student engagement. In that we probably do several of these, but we don't think about doing all of them. So what I'd like you to do now is back with your families. I'd like you to go through the list and identify how many strategies we just used in our neuron example. So go ahead and turn with each other and discuss, because you'll probably get more answers together than doing it on your own. No, we did not take a field trip into the neuron. We didn't.
Because that would have been awesome.
I know. Who was it, Miss Figgle or Miss Frizzle? Yes, I
You
know.
had plenty of time. You could have made this room on your own.
I know. All right, talk to each other.
We've had discussion.
Drawing artwork, check.
Graphic organizer.
I mean, that's part of it. Model.
Yeah.
We look Plus video, so it was funny.
We've done it. There's a rap worship.
Yeah, true, that was.
I'm really disappointed there. We got a little bit of time.
Where's the sermon? I want to shout.
Great. Great. Lori. I mean, I know. I did not use a wrap.
Is there a wrap?
So students will then do a project with the brain where they can make a video about different brain parts, and I have some students make brain wraps. So I had some students make a wrap.
Their brainstorming ideas in chemistry.
I'm sure.
I'll tell you there's some interesting ideas.
I'm sure. I'm sure.
Well, I don't know.
So count up how many that you have on your list once you've finished. He came prepared, extra prepared. Didn't know I was going to have. Didn't know I was copies. Right.
I think he's in preschool where there's all kinds of supplies and preparation.
Yeah, I'm not prepared.
With those ones, true.
Okay, so really when I'm thinking about doing this particular lesson and I look at my list of different strategies, my big strategy that I'm doing is drawing an artwork. If you think about how you might typically teach students about the neuron, you're probably going to list off these are the different parts of the neuron, this is what they do, and you might just talk about it and probably show a picture. And I've done that in the past, but then by having you do artwork, if you notice, I had my back turned to the students almost the whole time, and yet I was not at all concerned. Not that I mean I'd be concerned about you guys and your poor behavior or anything, but I mean I actually do this with my students, and I don't really worry that they're going to be goofing off behind me because I know that they're making this picture and they also want to make it exactly like mine, and that even Ryan getting upset about needing another color. The whole idea that he felt so inclined that he needed that other color just shows you kind of the amount of engagement that was really happening in that lesson. No, we didn't take a field trip, and we really didn't play a game, but I do tend to try to throw in some humor, and my humor is always just my own kind of personality in making jokes. I think that very much also with younger teachers, that they're sometimes afraid to be themselves. And yourself is a wonderful thing. And not to be afraid of kind of being your own sort of goofball, having your own kind of humor, and that I don't get worried about being silly when I make you, we're all doing this, right? Because you always get that cool kid who's like, I'm not gonna. But, by you being more of yourself, students will be more comfortable being themselves. So using humor. I did actually use a mnemonic device because axons do what? Axons speak, dendrites listen. I'll say that a lot in class, and students often do keep that because it actually is a form of a mnemonic device. A mnemonic device is really any kind of memory tool that you use similar letters, or you use specific phrases that you repeat multiple times. For example, right now we're studying sleep, and we talk about the different waves of sleep, and that when you're awake, you produce alpha waves. Awake, alpha. During deep sleep, delta waves. Deep sleep, delta waves. Anything like that you could really think of as a mnemonic device. We did do some movement. Just making you do this, as silly as it is, you're more engaged. You're paying more attention. And that doesn't mean you're getting up out of your seat, you're moving around, you're being so chaotic. It's just a small gesture that you can do to help increase that engagement. I didn't rap for you. The next thing that I might do in this lesson is that if I were to see you the next day, I'd probably have you be with your families and list off all the different parts of the neurons that you remember from the day before. And that what would probably happen is that you'd start getting more of that reciprocal teaching and cooperative learning from the students, because there's inevitably going to be something that you don't remember that another person does, and that helps with the engagement but also with the reteaching part. I did throw in a little bit of storytelling in that of like old people, that they lose their ability to drive. I often get a little bit more elaborate with younger kids. I start talking about Jeopardy and how if you look at like Jeopardy champions and who's most likely going to be a Jeopardy champion, it's someone who is usually in their late 20s, early 30s. It can be really painful. They did this tournament of champions once where it was like the champions from the 90s. And they were all people who were like 50, 60 years old. And that wait time, oh yeah, definitely. And that's again like highlighting that myelin sheath, because part of Jeopardy, it's not just knowing things, it's being really, really fast about it. So I usually tell a little bit more of the story part with that. But then the visual aspect that we were doing, and it's really kind of a simple lesson. But the point of this is to look at, these are instructional strategies that we know increase engagement. And that good teachers reflect on their teaching and say, you know what, I do some of these, but I know I don't do all of them. What is it that I could potentially do more of that would increase my student engagement? Because no matter who is sitting in my classroom, if they are engaged, they're capable of learning. And so it doesn't matter how high or how low, that their engagement is just going to help with their achievement, whatever my subject area might be. So this was kind of what I really wanted to highlight for you. Marcia Tate has several books about this, where she goes into more detail about, what are different examples of these. And so if you ever wanted to borrow something like that or look it over, you could obviously see me. But that's all that I have for you today. I really appreciate you coming. You have an incentive ticket that you can give back to me, and I will, or actually you can probably give them to Lauren because they go to High Schools at Work people. And then you also should have gotten a contact hour for being here. But thank you very much for coming. Yay!